What is up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Somewhat Sports Podcast. My name is Chris, and I'm joined by two of the greats in this industry, Jurg and Dame. How are we this week? It feels like I haven't talked to you guys in forever. Jurg, you've been in hiatus, a little bit of a break. Much deserved, of course, much needed. How are you, my man?
I mean, it's more so work keeping me out than anything. And, spoiler alert for next week's episode as well. Work is also keeping me out for, reasons. Travel, that's why. But yeah, man, like I've missed the show. Like I don't like taking any, like I don't like missing episodes to say the very least. Chris and Dame know that very much. So I always hate it when I have to miss an episode because I love talking sports and I love talking to my boys. These are two of the best in the game today that I get to chop it up with. And now we're back. The big three is back together again. A better big three than what the Phoenix Suns have. That's for damn sure.
I'm doing good as well. It does feel like it's been like a month since I've heard Jurg's voice. I hear Chris's voice almost every day on PS5 when he's missing wide open goals in pro clubs, but
I knew it.
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I just had to take that shot.
Yeah, I don't. You don't have to, but whatever.
I do. It's well deserved. Maybe it'll motivate you to be better. But other than that, I'm doing good. Doing good. A little slow in the sports world outside of hockey, but doing well.
Yeah, and you mentioned hockey, Dame. It's going to be a hockey-dominated episode, NHL-based, and of course, we're also going to talk about some NFL stuff. But yeah, Jurg's back. It's been a while since we've talked hockey. In his words, it's the most eventful past few months in NHL in quite some time. So he's going to have the floor. He's going to do what he does best. He's going to talk about all that stuff. And then after that, we're going to talk some NFL. I know the NFL Combine is this week, guys. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah. The draft is what, next month?
April.
End of April, I think.
Okay, yeah, and we're already in March, so it is next month. Mock draft season will be soon, of course. We'll be on that. But yeah, some news here and there. Aaron Rodgers is back from taking drugs. Jalen Ramsey's in trade rumors. A few players have been released, actually. Funny enough. Derek Carr's still honey dicking teams. The Ravens continue to be an unserious organization with Lamar Jackson. But yeah, we'll talk about all of that. But I did come up with a special kind of game. I didn't really come up with it. I kind of just took influence. To anyone that watches First Things First on FS1, Nick Wright does this thing called the tiers. I've decided to do something like that where I make a tier list of the NFL teams going into next season and where they stand currently as of their current rosters. No moves, just based on their current rosters. Basically, how would they fare going into next season, right? So I'd put, like, for example, Titans. You'd put like the Chiefs and the Bills. That's just an example. And then of course, like, you have like another tiers like the rebuilding / not good teams, something like that. So we're gonna cap off with that. But of course, we start off with the best. Jurg, NHL news. You have a lot to talk about. Talk to us. What do you got?
Yeah, so the last week or so of the NHL world has been the most wild news focused week there is. So this Friday is the NHL trade deadline, and that's the big reason for it. We'll probably most likely be past it by the end of this, or by the time people listen to this episode. But that's the context. The NHL trade deadline, and normally the trade deadline, like, I like to try to hype it up. I've spoken about it in years past here on the pod with like some trades here and there where notable stuff happened, but it wasn't crazy. It was maybe a team or two at most. But this year's different. This year was absolutely different because there were so many guys going into this deadline that were like, oh, no, they're probably going to get traded, probably should be traded, will be traded. Like, so many guys that fit into different categories for varying reasons, whether their teams are rebuilding, tried to compete at the start, etc. And it's not really like, it's not an easy thing to try to summarize it all up. So I'm going to do the best job I can for the people here. I have it tiered off in my own little tier system here. Not so much of a tier system, but I have what I think were the three biggest names that have been dealt so far. I got winners, I got losers, and I'll probably mention like a name or two at the end that I still think will be traded just for the sake of it. Because like I said, there's a lot to say the very least of what happened here. So I'm not going to waste any more time, badgering and BSing the people, I'm going to just get straight into it. I'm going to start with the first of the three names that I have here. Ironically, also the first of these three players I'm going to specifically go into in terms of the full trade. I'll mention with all these, like when I get to the winners and losers, the deals they made, some of what they got back, but it's not going to be as much detail as what these three trades will be. So I'm going to start with the New Jersey Devils and the deal they made with the San Jose Sharks for Timo Meier. The New Jersey Devils shocking a lot of people this season after a rough start to the year, absolutely ripping through the NHL. Top three in their division right now, if I'm not mistaken. The young core of this team clearly coming out to play, showing a lot of promise. And when you have that situation, you feel that as a fan, obviously, and even as myself, it's like New Jersey's got to reward this team. They got to get a guy to solidify that lineup. And the biggest name, and they were consistently for this guy the entire time, was Timo Meier of the San Jose Sharks. Had a career year last season for himself in goals and is going to surpass that this year. He's already I think 7-8 goals off from the total he had last season, and there's still some time to go. He's probably going to finish with 40 goals on this season, a career high there. And so Meier, his ability to just score, his scoring touch just took a whole leap over the last year and a half or so. Big player, he's not going to be easy to push around. He's the exact kind of guy that you would like for a playoff push, and this is this Devils team with the emergence of Hischier and Hughes as that amazing 1-2 punch, finally playing well after years of futility, to say the very least. They made a big move, and so they made this big deal with the San Jose Sharks for Meier in what ended up being a 13-piece move here. So 13 pieces involved in this trade just between both of those teams is absolutely wild, to say the very least. So the New Jersey Devils from the San Jose Sharks got Timo Meier, a 2024 fifth-round pick, and 4 players that are predominantly AHL players for the most part. I'm not really going to bring too much of a mention of a lot of these guys, but it was just 4 other players that were involved in this deal that the San Jose Sharks sent over. The more important thing is what the San Jose Sharks got back, which was a 2023 first-round pick, a conditional first-round pick, where it's top 2 protected. So if the Devils get first or second somehow this year, which is highly unlikely to say the very least, it'll transfer to a 2024 pick. They got that. They got a 2024 conditional second-round pick that could become a first-round pick if the New Jersey Devils were to reach the 2023 Eastern Conference Final, and Meier plays in at least 50% of their games in the playoffs. It could actually also transfer potentially if if they make the conference finals in 2024 as well, to say the very least. And finally, a 2024 seventh round pick. And those were just the picks in terms of players they got back. They got back a veteran just to make the contract work, like the money in Andreas Janssen. But the main pieces that they got back were Fabian Zetterlund and Shakir Mukhamadullin, a former first round pick from a couple years ago from the COVID draft in particular. Was Mukhamadullin. That's the draft he was in, which was a very hard draft to say the very least. He shocked a lot of people in terms of how high he went. And some people, he's a very much a prospect that people go back and forth on. But the kid has played in the KHL, which is the Russian hockey league, so the top hockey league in Russia, and he's performed really well, and which is impressive because more so, I think this is the thing with the KHL, but I think it's also kind of similar in the Swedish elite league and the Finnish liga to say the very least. Like those teams, they don't play young players to help develop them for the team. They play young players if they perform well. And Shakir Mukhamadullin has been phenomenal, to say the very least, in the KHL. He's really developed well over there. He's played great. He's scoring a bit, throwing the body around. For a young guy to have the amount of success he's had in the KHL is shocking. And the fact that he's performed this well is a very hopeful sign for the San Jose Sharks, to say the very least, that they're getting this former first round pick back. That looks like he's living up to the potential after what was a interesting draft year, and a lot of people, some of the picks from 2020, we still don't know how they're exactly going to pan out at the NHL level. This kid looks like he's at least going to be able to perform pretty well if he's doing great in the KHL. And I'm assuming, and it would be very, hopeful thinking for the Sharks if they're able to bring him over to North America next season, try him out in the AHL for their minor league team, the San Jose Barracuda, and then they could go from there. Fabian Zetterlund is a guy that's gotten a little bit of playing time with the Devils this season, is a roster player. He'll find a role on the Sharks, probably more of a middle six forward going into the future, but nothing to sneeze at all. Like the Sharks had to get back at least a roster player or two. I feel with Meier, they couldn't just get back all guys, especially because the perception was the Sharks would at least be a bit active come the deadline. And so Fabian Zetterlund is not bad. And Nikita Okotiuk is another guy who, we'll see what happens there. I mean, can they make anything of him? Can he crack the roster? Who knows? Like, I think there's always a chance potentially, but you never know. Like that's one thing with this deal is that the San Jose Sharks got a lot back for predominantly Timo Meyer and that 5th round pick, and I say a lot in terms of quantity. The quality is interesting to say the very least. The fact that they didn't get back any of what people would have ranked as the tier A prospects of the New Jersey Devils is something that is slightly shocking for me. I knew that Simone Nemec and Luke Hughes were definitely going to be off the table. I didn't think the Devils would part ways with either of them at all in this deal or for any other big deal that they would have tried to swing at. And I knew that a big thing for them was to try to keep Dawson Mercer. But I did think Alexander Holtz, a former 1st round pick of them from a couple years ago, I thought he would have for sure been involved in a deal like this. The fact that the San Jose Sharks didn't get him back was kind of surprising. And it's also, yes, that 2nd round pick is conditional, can become a first, probably a good chance at it becoming a first. So they do technically get 2 1st-round picks back in this deal for a player. But for Meyer, who, again, had the career year last year, is even going to surpass that this season, the return to some people was a bit underwhelming. And I don't blame it. I think I'm kind of in the middle of we'll see what some of these guys can become. Can Zetterlund become a consistent force on this team for 5, 6, 7 years as a middle 6 forward who, can perform? Can Mukamadulin come over from the KHL? Can he perform great here in North America? And can he prove that he was the right selection in the 1st round in that complicated 2020 COVID draft? And can these 1st-round picks become something? This is always the tricky thing. And boys, you know this from other sports. We've talked about this in the NFL and the NBA plenty of times because we've always done mock drafts for those. Like 1st-round picks are great. 1st-round picks are nice, but draft picks are like, it's kind of a boomer bust thing. And I don't just mean the prospects you pick. Like you could hit with a draft pick really well and it's like great scouting, or you could completely miss with the draft picks you get. Just because you get a lot of draft picks doesn't mean you're necessarily going to, make use of all of them in particular. I think we've seen that over the years in both the other sports that we predominantly talk about. So I think at the end of it, this was a great deal for the Devils. They add a guy to put in their top 6 forward group. You could it's so flexible. They could put him with Hischier. They could put him with Hughes. He's definitely going to be on the power play. Timo Meyer to this New Jersey Devils team just adds another punch to them. And the fact that the Eastern Conference has been elite this season, I'm going to summarize that at the end of all the trade talk. But the Eastern Conference has been just gangbusters this season. The Devils needed this kind of deal to keep up in this arms race, and this was a great deal for sure. So absolute W for the New Jersey Devils here. Next player I'm going to talk about, I guess I'm just going to go in chronological order of when guys got drafted here. Patrick Kane was finally dealt after perception going back to the preseason and into this year was that at some point the Blackhawks were going to work out a trade with Patrick Kane. The question was just going to be to who. Patrick Kane had a no move clause, and Kyle Davidson made it very clear from the beginning of the season and even late in the offseason that Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews, who end up not getting traded due to COVID-related illness issues. All well wishes to the captain. I hope he's able to get better, of course. The plan was always to do right by those guys, and Davidson carried that through to the end. It was kind of obvious that Patrick Kane wanted to go to the Rangers. It was all but hinted at. I believe there were probably times this season where the Blackhawks tried to talk with his representation if he wanted to go somewhere else. But ultimately, Patrick Kane only wanted to go to the New York Rangers, and that kind of hamstrung Chicago and what they got back in this deal. So it ended up being a 3-team deal. This is a popular thing now the last couple seasons in the NHL where a 3rd team will swoop in to help retain some of the cap hit on a player. Not the salary per se, but just the cap hit on a player before that player ends up going to the final team that they are meant to go to. The Coyotes were that in this trade. They retained 25% of Patrick Kane's contract cap it for the remainder of the season, and they received a 2025 3rd-round pick from the New York Rangers for their troubles. But the main deal of this one is Patrick Kane to the New York Rangers, as well as Cooper Zek also went there, but that's not really important. What went back to the Chicago Blackhawks is a 2023 2nd-round pick that is a conditional pick. I believe it will become a 1st-rounder if the Rangers were to make the Eastern Conference Finals, if I'm not mistaken. And they also got a 2025 4th-round pick as well. So they got that. They also got 2 other players in this trade, but both those guys are more minor league players. Not too much to talk about there. The most important portion of this deal is the fact that Patrick Kane was finally dealt. Showtime was dealt from Chicago. Thank you for your service, Patrick Kane. I've made it clear on the show before I'm a Blackhawk fan. So, to a guy who I just absolutely loved watching, to say the very least, no longer being on my team. I was ready for it at the start of the season, but to see him actually go it brings a little tear to the eye. It brings a little bit of emotion out of the lack of heart, body that I have here. But Patrick Kane being dealt to the New York Rangers for that return, mainly just a 2nd and a 4th round pick. It sucked, to say the very least. The Blackhawks sort of made up for it in another deal here, and they could potentially at least get one or two more picks back here to end off the deadline, depending on who else they could trade. It wasn't a big return, but again, Patrick Kane a little bit older now. He's 34 years old. Some health issues as the season went along. Like there was a big rumor going around that a lot of people were concerned about his hip, and a lot of people thought that very close here to the deadline he was done. He then responds with 7 goals in 4 games, and that completely reopened the realm of possibility for him to get traded this season without a shadow of a doubt. And the Rangers and the Blackhawks get that deal done. The Rangers get him. They add his veteran leadership. This is a guy that has won 3 Stanley Cups, has won an MVP award, has won a Conn Smythe. But the big thing is here, I think his personality, I think he's going to mesh well with the New York Rangers players as a whole. He's very good friends with Artemi Panarin, who his first 2 seasons in the league played with the Blackhawks, played with Patrick Kane. The two of them are very good friends still to this day, former line mates when they were together on the Hawks. And the whole point of it was, for the Rangers to reunite the two together. They did make another deal, which I will bring up here shortly, because trust me when I say the Rangers definitely won the last week or so of trades, to say the very least. But that was the next big deal to kind of recap here. And again, because Jonathan Toews is not going to be traded due to COVID-related illness, this is the big name that Chicago was able to trade. They get him off the books. One of the icons of what was a great decade of Chicago Blackhawk hockey is officially gone. And now it's been a rebuild this whole time, but it is truly no faces of the franchise left, depending on what happens with Jonathan Toews if he wants to continue his career after this season. The Blackhawks are a brand new era team going forward, and we will see what that era involves, as I've said on the show several times recently this season. Please get the first overall pick, boys. Please, hockey gods. And the New York Rangers, they add a veteran, to say the very least, that can just absolutely add to their playoff push. But again, I'll add a little bit more to that come the winners and losers. And finally, the last big trade here. This is a guy, if the Patrick Kane thing has been rumored since like the offseason, this guy was rumored to be gone since even late last season. In the playoffs, it was made clear that the Arizona Coyotes, the plan this entire time was to trade former first-round pick for them, Jakob Chychrun. Jakob Chychrun, a very young, very good defenseman for the Arizona Coyotes. A little bit of a slow start to his career, but eventually it became a great defenseman with this team. But going back to last season, especially at the end, even after last year's trade deadline, it was a school of thought that he was going to be the next big name traded from this Coyotes team, as they have been, basically tanking for the last several years now, and that he was going to be traded probably at some point during this 2022 to 2023 season. And, going back to the offseason, it was rumors that the Coyotes wanted literally the sun and the moon for him. They wanted at least 1 or 2 first round picks, 1 or 2 prospects that were at least first round caliber, and a roster player. And, at the time, the demand, I don't want to say made sense, but when you consider the last couple years of the NHL trade deadline and what some guys have been traded for, especially defensemen, the highly coveted market of defensemen in the NHL is something that, I don't have enough time to get into in this episode. But if you listen to hockey, if you watch hockey, if you keep track of hockey and you're listening to this, you guys understand what I mean. In the sport, the defensemen, especially top 2, top 4 defensemen that could play on your top pairs, have been extremely coveted the last couple of years, and teams have overpaid, to say the very least, to get those guys on their team in terms of trading picks and prospects. So that was the mindset that the Coyotes had this entire time. He was injured towards the end of last year, and so Chychrun started this year hurt, and a lot of people were wondering if the price was going to go down because, he's hurt. How is he going to play when he gets back? Jakob Chychrun gets back, and he plays really well as you could play for playing on a complete, absolute dumpster fire in the Arizona Coyotes. But he was doing his job. He was performing well, and the standard looked like, okay, the Arizona Coyotes are still going to get a lot back for him. Maybe not the ridiculous asking price they had it back in the summer, but they're still going to get a lot for him. You guys know this. Teams make high demands of their coveted players at the start, and then you eventually have to negotiate down. Well, the thing was, is like we absolutely had no idea what the heck was happening until recently. I believe it was like a week and a half or 2 weeks ago at this point. It was allegedly rumored that a deal with the LA Kings was all but done, basically, but it never happened. The trigger was never pulled on that. And to this day, it's really weird. I believe what happened was that the Coyotes wanted to see what else they could have gotten back for Chychrun, and they leaked this deal to the media, and the Kings, easily to imagine, they were none too pleased with this. Absolutely, we're not happy. And as I'm going to talk about a little bit here, clearly decided to move on from this, and they actually went with another defenseman here during the deadline, to say the very least. But the The Coyotes get spurned there. I mean, they kind of really did it to themselves, but the Kings no longer interested. The Kings then end up making a deal. The Edmonton Oilers, who some people were trying to link to Chittering, made a deal. The Boston Bruins, who some people were linking last minute if they could get him, they made a deal for a defenseman. So many defensemen were available at this deadline. So many teams picking it up. The options were limited, but finally, the Arizona Coyotes found a dance partner for Jacob Chittering. The Ottawa Senators, who were also a team even going back to the offseason that was linked to, heavily towards him, they get a deal done with him for a grand total of 3 draft picks. It was a first-round pick in 2023 that is top 5 protected that can become a 2024 first-round unprotected, so a conditional pick there. If the Ottawa Senators, a second-round pick in 2023 and 2024 as well, from the looks of it. I will confirm those years in a bit, but one of the second-round picks as well, should the Senators reach the Eastern Conference Finals, the 2024 second-round pick that's involved in this deal could become a 2024 first-round pick, top 10 protected. To say the very least, big time. This was the top defenseman. I shouldn't say that. This was the top defenseman available if you combine age, production, and contract. He had 28 points in 36 games this season. 2 more years under contract at a very reasonable cap at a 4.6 million. And again, his age, pretty young player to say the very least. A guy in his mid 20s in Jacob Chittering does not get made available, only but so often. So for him to have been made available at this deadline, again, it's in part because the Arizona Coyotes are an absolute, dumpster fire, like I've already said. But when he's made available, you expect a lot of teams to be interested, and teams weren't interested. But at the end of the day, I think the Coyotes really shot themselves in the foot here because they had to deal with the Kings, and I don't know what the alleged deal was. It's not like we just had the NBA trade deadline here recently where there was apparently a list of alleged deals that the Nets declined before taking the Mavericks' final deal for Kyrie. No idea personally what the Kings deal would have been with the Coyotes. If I had to take a guess, I probably think the Kings would have been closer to offering what they wanted. I think it would have definitely been a first, probably a second, maybe one more second or third, and then maybe a prospect similar to this deal, or 2 firsts and a prospect, if I had to just guess what Rob Blake and the LA Kings were going to do. But again, I do not have any confirmation of that, so please do not take me for verbatim on that. But the Coyotes shot themselves in the foot into what potentially could have been a pretty good offer from the Kings. I'm assuming it would have been, and they lost dance partners because you guys understand this. As teams are wheeling and dealing and making moves, when teams are adding players of a similar position to what you have, the market goes down. So the Toronto Maple Leafs got a defenseman before this. The Boston Bruins, like I said, ended up getting Dmitry Kulikov from the Washington Capitals. The Edmonton Oilers ended up making a deal for a defenseman. And the LA Kings, before this trade, like the day before this Chittering deal happened, also traded for a defenseman. So all these teams that a lot of people tried to link to Jacob Chittering and the Coyotes, ultimately making other moves for similar players, you start to lose a little bit there, and that's where you lose your leverage. And to be realistic, actually, the Coyotes, I mean, it would have been annoying if they would have done, but they could have actually just stand pat and say, we're going to keep him one more year, but they decided not to do it. They said, all right, it's been way too long. They've actually sat him recently here the last week and a half or so before trading him, and finally they pull off the deal, sending him to the Ottawa Senators. Big W for Ottawa. Not one of the explicit winners, I said, because I want to try to separate that as much as I can. But a great deal here for the Senators, getting a guy in Chittering who I think there's some pretty good defensemen on that team here in Ottawa, and Thomas Chabot, and I think Jake Sanderson is good. But I think Jacob Chittering walks in as the bona fide number one guy on that blue line. I think him and Thomas Chabot as a top pair, or if you could split the two of them and get them to balance the ice time, I think is absolutely great. The Senators, I don't think and know if they'll make the playoffs this year. I think the dominance of the Eastern Conference is so apparent that if they did make the playoffs, I don't know if they'd be able to do anything. But at the same time, this is a great deal, I think, for next season, where you're hopeful that a team or two is going to take a step back in the East, which is potential depending on how the offseason goes. But God, that's months down the line. But I think this is a great deal by the Ottawa Senators overall. And for the Arizona Coyotes, I have a little bit more on them here in a few moments. But let me just quickly go through the winners and the losers of the NHL trade deadline, in my opinion. My winners, like I already mentioned them before, the New York Rangers to me were an absolute winner. Not only did they get Patrick Kane, but they got Vladimir Tarasenko even before that in a deal with the St. Louis Blues. These are two guys that some people might think, well, why did the Rangers trade for both of them? What sense is that? The sense is that you're adding two guys who both have Stanley Cup experience, two guys that have won the Stanley Cup, and two guys that are absolutely just snipers on the ice who can help in the offense. And that's the big thing for this Rangers team. Last year in the playoffs, yes, they made the Eastern Conference Finals, but they could have easily lost in the first round to the Pittsburgh Penguins. They were down 3-1 in that series. People forget that. And the Carolina Hurricane series was a very, complicated series where the home team just kept winning there. I think the only home team that didn't win was the Rangers in that game 7 in that second round against the Hurricanes. So at the end of the day, it's like the Rangers were very close. They were a goal away at several moments from losing in the first or second round last year. So while it was a strong finish, it wasn't a smooth path to get there. This ensures that it should be smoother because you had these two guys next to the core of Panarin, Zibanejad, Chris Kreider. You have the great offense there in Adam Fox from the point. Keandre Miller is an absolute stud. Jacob Trouba, the captain, is just going to throw the body around. He's just going to basically injure guys. I don't know if it's going to be on purpose or not, but he basically has the potential to injure guys with how hard he hits. So this was a great deal for this New York Rangers team that is trying to challenge the upper echelon of the Eastern Conference, which to me is the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Boston Bruins. Ipso facto, the Boston Bruins are another winner in this deadline for me. Their trade for Dmitry Orlov and Gareth Hathaway from the Washington Capitals, where they ended up trading a first, a second, a third round pick, and two random players in this deal. Actually, one of those players coming from the Minnesota Wild, because again, this was a 3-team deal where Minnesota got rewarded with a fifth round pick for taking on 25% of Orlov's cap hit. That in and of itself would have made the Boston Bruins a winner, and I wouldn't have had much else to say about that, honestly. But they actually, literally just hours ago, made another deal with the Detroit Red Wings to get Tyler Bertuzzi from them for a 2024 first round pick and a 2025 fifth round pick. Oh, good God in heaven, the Boston Bruins are, stacking up to absolutely destroy people, to say the very least. The Boston Bruins have been the best team in the NHL this season, without a shadow of a doubt. They're on a record point pace. A lot of people projecting that they could and probably should end up toppling the Detroit Red Wings' mighty record from, the 90s. At this point, they're 60 games into the season. They have 99 points. They're the only team in the NHL that is over 90 points at this juncture. Maybe might or might not change by the time the podcast comes out. They are the only team with over 40 wins. There is one other team with 40 wins from what I'm seeing, but they're the only team with over 40. They have 47 wins in 60 games this season. The Bruins have been a machine. They're absolutely dominating teams. They're destroying people. They are the definitive team in the NHL this season. They have the best goal differential in the league. Good God in heaven, this Boston Bruins team looked like it's on path. It's their destiny, it feels like, to try to win the Stanley Cup, and we'll see what happens there. And these are two guys that fit the team, fit the culture, fit the play style. Absolute W. I think the Bruins might be the biggest winner of the deadline in and of itself. And to mention a couple more teams that got some W's here, I think the Maple Leafs, like I mentioned earlier, they made a trade with my Blackhawks where they got Jake McCabe and Sam Lafferty. They also made a deal with the Blues to get Ryan O'Reilly and Nola Chari. I think absolutely outstanding. Those are all guys that add depth to the team. It makes them more physical. It makes them a tougher team to play against. They also made a deal to get, the prodigal son Luke Shen back into the organization. He's going to throw the body around. I think the Maple Leafs, the whole thing with the Leafs is that they're playoff demons. They haven't won a first round series in, I think, well over 16 years. I believe at this point, it could be even more than that. We're slowly approaching 2 decades since the last time the Leafs won a first round playoff series. Some Sacramento Kings type beat there. Even the Sacramento Kings have to bow down to that one, boys. But the Maple Leafs certainly look like they are trying to compete here. Their first round opponent looks to be the Tampa Bay Lightning. And if they beat Tampa Bay, you know who their most likely second round opponent would be? The playoff boogeyman, Boston Bruins. Toronto trying to stack up to take on what has been the best team in the league this season and the best team in the East the last 3 years, the 3-time defending Eastern Conference champ Tampa Bay Lightning. We'll see if this helps, but this was at least pretty good for Toronto to make that happen for themselves. My last two winners are the St. Louis Blues and the Edmonton Oilers. I did like all the trade that the St. Louis Blues made. I think they got a good amount of stuff back for the players that they gave away. Some draft picks here to do like a mini reset. They still have a lot of great pieces there, and this is actually similar to what they did a couple years ago when they traded some previous core pieces of what was their original set of guys like TJ Oshie and David Backes. They let a group of those guys go and just retooled on the fly, and they ended up making the Stanley Cup final back in 2019 and winning it all. So, the St. Louis Blues have done this before. They traded some important pieces, but they didn't trade away their whole team. They did not blow up the roster in any way, shape, or form, and I think that was very great by them. And my last one is the Edmonton Oilers, simply because you got Matthias Ekholm from the Nashville Predators. I did not think the Predators were going to give up Matthias Ekholm, but they did, and that was an absolute steal and a W by them. They had to give up a pretty penny. They gave up Tyson Barrie, first-round pick, and I think a fourth-round pick, but it's well worth it. Ekholm is an absolute beast, two-way player. Is going to be great for them come the playoffs. This is a guy who has great playoff experience. He's made a Stanley Cup final before. If you can notice a pattern here, boys, teams really like trading for guys who have made it deep in the playoffs in the past. So Matthias Ekholm really shores up an Edmonton defensive unit that needs to step up and perform come playoff time, because the whole future of the Edmonton Oilers playoffs is based off if that defense and goaltending can support McDavid and Draisaitl. Who McDavid, good God in heaven, he's the best player in the league, and it's not even close. This is not the time for it, but I've because in recent weeks with the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl, I know Dame said it that, Mahomes is easily the best player in football. That's what this is in the NHL. And I would argue that in the NHL, more so than in any other sports league, that there is a bigger gap between the number one and the number two player than any other league. I think there's a bigger gap between McDavid and any other player you want to rank as the number two in the league compared to any other sport. And the Oilers, you need to win with that guy on your team. And this trade certainly helps. My three quick losers here: the Arizona Coyotes. Simply put, they wasted our time over the last year plus with the Jacob Chitrin stuff. They sat him for the last 2 weeks to finally get a deal, and it wasn't even that good of, you completely undersold what you had wanted. Yes, I understand that that was a insane asking price and they were never going to get it, but just the first 2 seconds, and yes, maybe one of the seconds could become a first. It's kind of underwhelming, to say the very least. Very disappointing by the Ottawa Senators. Or no, not the Senators, excuse me, the Coyotes in that regard. They made another trade or two here and there, which is fine. But the big trade that was supposed to net them a lot, apparently they did not do well. And the LA Kings, simply put, I felt that the guy that they got from the Columbus Blue Jackets, Gavrikov, was kind of overrated. I didn't think he was worth a first and much else, but apparently the LA Kings looked at him and said, hot damn, we got to trade a lot for him. They traded a first-round pick this year, a third-round pick next year, and Jonathan Quick, their franchise goaltender over the last decade, who, even though he's not the same, that's still one of the icons of the franchise. Future, you're going to get his jersey retired and everything. The backstop to 2 Stanley Cup winning teams there. They just, trade him and throw him away like a sack of potatoes to Columbus, Ohio, of all places. In all due respect, I don't really care much about the whole Ohio slander, but more so the Blue Jackets have been terrible this season. And they get back Gavrikov plus Jonas Korpisalo. I think this is the biggest boom or bust deal of this trade deadline. I think if this is a boom, Gavrikov is a top 4 defenseman who helps in the playoffs, and Korpisalo could perform potentially well. If this is a bust, Gavrikov proves to be as useless as I expect, which I don't think he's going to help him that much in the playoffs that some people are expecting. And Korpisalo is just not going to perform well at all. And that has been the biggest issue with the Kings this season, their goaltending. If their goaltending flops and they trade away their franchise icon, which very much upset the locker room, it's going to be bad times. I don't know if I don't think the Kings will miss the playoffs. I think the talent is still there. I think there's too much talent there for them to miss it. But in terms of morale, as Chris likes to say, good vibes and immaculate vibes. The Kings are no longer immaculate vibes with this trade, to say the very least. And again, I personally thought it was an overpayment for a first and anything else for Gavrikov. But to be proven wrong, that is the definition of being an NHL fan. And my final loser, the Vancouver Canucks, just for existing. I don't really got much else to say. They've underwhelmed in the trades they've done. They got a third-round pick back for Luke Shen, which I guess was relatively impressive. Okay, the return for Bo Horvat was meh at best, and just the Canucks are a dumpster fire. If I called Arizona Coyotes a dumpster fire, the Vancouver Canucks, to say the very least, are just confusing with the treatment of Bruce Boudreau, who they unceremoniously fired this season, with just the asinine decisions that they've made over the last year. The Vancouver Canucks, simply put, they're a loser the last year plus for existing. Bad, just bad for the Vancouver Canucks as a whole. My final thoughts on this. Good God in heaven, I know that was a lot, and I apologize for anyone that has had to just listen to me ramble for the last half hour. I know it's not easy, but this was easily the most hyperactive, transaction-heavy week in the NHL that we've had, I think, since the 04-05 lockout happened. I think in the modern salary cap era of the NHL, this is the most exciting time. This is the most transaction heavy. There are deals I have not mentioned that just would be way too much to do. That happened here. Other teams have made deals. But I think this was an absolutely outstanding thing to take away from the deadline from the NHL, is that the league for the last week has been the center of attention, I think, low key, because of all the deals that have been made. And there's still a couple more pieces that could be moved, mainly Erik Karlsson, James Van Riemsdyk. Maybe if the Canucks are losing their mind even more, which is a possibility, Thatcher Demko could potentially get moved for the right price. I think tomorrow's NHL trade deadline, which again is probably going to be passed by the time this is posted, I think it's still something to be worth watching. But this has been, for me as a hockey fan who has been wanting the NHL to get in the news cycle way more, this has been the best week and a half of the league over the last 5-10 years of my time as a hockey fan, and I'm just so happy about it. So thank you all for listening to this goddamn rant, to say the very least. Boys, thank you for listening. I think it's time to bring my two kings back in here, Chris and Dame. Please come back. The people that we're sinking here now.
Well, Jurg, I'm happy that you're happy, pal. I'm happy that you're happy. I mean, it's good. It's good that NHL has this kind of boom period of news and transactions, because we needed something to kind of take the reins in sports, because I mean, NBA has been kind of a little dry ever since the trade deadline, and then I think NFL. I mean, we'll get more news in the coming weeks when the draft's kind of nearing by, and then of course we're gonna have decisions by a few players. But yeah, it's awesome that NHL has this plethora of news, and props to you for talking about it. All right, well, speaking of NFL, let's get to it, fellas. There's some news here and there. I guess we'll talk about it after this segment, the tier segment, of course. So yeah, this is basically what I did. I came up for both conferences a tier list, basically where teams stand currently, given their current rosters. Some teams don't even have a quarterback. Some teams are kind of rebuilding. Some teams are question marks, and we're going to talk about them. I'm going to give you guys the tier list, and then you guys could give your thoughts on it, and you guys could, if you want, switch teams based on how you see them. Basically, your input after them. So I'll say the tiers. I'll say which teams are in the tiers. You guys could agree, disagree, give your input, your thoughts, your criticisms, concerns, disagreements, agreements. Just go off on me. How about that? All right. Let's start off with the AFC. So I have the Titans of the tiers in the AFC. So in the Titans tier, I have the Chiefs, the Bengals, and the Bills. Those are the only three teams in the Titans tier list. Next tier, the secondary tier, which is the tier below the Titans. Not quite there, but they could make noise. They could make noise next season, in my opinion. I have, and I know, bear with me, just bear with me, the Los Angeles Chargers, the Miami Dolphins, and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, I know the Chargers are kind of like those, it's that team. They just blew I believe it was a 27-0 lead to the Jacksonville Jaguars, but I have faith in Justin Herbert, and I still like that roster a lot, to be honest. The Dolphins, I think when Tua was playing, pretty decent. I think we had them in the tier with the Chiefs and the Bills before the Bengals kind of pulled up and, just showed the league that, they're still there. But I think if Tua was playing for most of the games, I think things would be different. But again, we don't know how Tua is going to be next season because of this whole concussion thing. Jacksonville, I'm a little bit bullish on. They get Calvin Ridley to the roster, which is a very solid addition. And dude, they made the divisional round these past playoffs. So I'm bullish on them. I expect the vibes to carry over to next season. Trevor Lawrence seems to be on the generational path. Doug Peterson, they seem to have bought in on him. So yeah, I'm bullish on the Jaguars. Next here, question marks of the AFC. I have the Baltimore Ravens, the Cleveland Browns, and the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders could have easily been like a tier below this, but I think I like their roster. Like, they do still have Devontae Adams. They have Darren Waller. They have Max Crosby. They still have Chandler Jones. Like, I kind of like their roster. It's just that their quarterback position's kind of fucked. We have to wait and see what happens with that. But I just think I like their supporting cast to a point where I have them as question marks. Cleveland Browns, they'll get a full season of Deshaun Watson. Again, they have Amari Cooper, Myles Garrett, Nick Chubb, David Njoku, who has been a standout, Donovan Peoples-Jones, kind of a relevation as well. Not to a big extent, but I kind of like the roster. I do think they're in need of another wide receiver, but I think they could do some damage next season, possibly, but that's why I have them as question marks. Next question mark, I also have the Baltimore Ravens. Fellas, a state of influx for this team. Lamar Jackson, I have no idea what's going to happen. It all depends on what Lamar Jackson does. If Lamar Jackson plays, I always think they're a playoff team, but I have zero idea with what's going on with Lamar Jackson. I don't know what's going on with this franchise. And I don't know. We've talked about the Lamar Jackson trade rumors, but I mean, ad nauseum, we're going to be beating a dead horse if we continue to talk about that. I just don't know what happens. I really don't. It's kind of like a domino effect. If he leaves, then this team goes to yeah, we'll see. I don't know if Lamar Jackson leaves. They're clearly not going to be a playoff team if Lamar leaves. Even if with their trade package, I don't think they'll get anyone as close as good to Lamar Jackson. So, yeah, those are the three question marks. Next here, purgatory at the moment. New York Jets, New England Patriots, Pittsburgh Steelers, Denver Broncos. Broncos, it's pretty simple. Very disappointing season, but with the addition of Sean Payton, I am genuinely curious to see what they're going to do. I just think Williams kind of getting hurt. Their star running back really fucked them. But again, who knows what Russell Wilson can do with Sean Payton? You also have Jerry Jeudy as well. They have some decent weapons that I like. They just seem to be like the quintessential purgatory team, man. That Russell Wilson deal, I don't know. It's set them back years already. I mean, you could only pray that Sean Payton brings justice to them. Pittsburgh Steelers, I actually think they have a decent roster as well. So they're always decent at the worst. Mike Tomlin, obviously one of the best coaches. Kenny Pickett will finally have his actual full season. I do like some of their weapons, man. I really do. Like, you have Pickens, you have Najee Harris. They traded Chase Claypool. I believe they got the Bears second round pick. Oh my god, a steal right there. I think they're
Which is the first overall pick in the second round. I'm pretty
well,
sure.
technically it's kind of like a first round.
Yeah, and it is because the Dolphins forfeit their pick, so
Right.
technically it's the 32nd pick, which is
Right.
the first. It's crazy.
I completely forgot about that. So like the Steelers are in prime position to be. I mean, they're never out of it, man. Like they're always there, and like their defense is stacked as well. I mean, they could go any way here, and they're just man. They're just always there. They're always in the playoff hunt, man. Mike Tomlin still not had a losing season. I believe they were. Did they have a tie last season? I believe something like that. But if someone could fact check that for me, what the Steelers' uh, record was last season, that'd
Pretty
be
sure
great.
they did have a tie.
They were 9-8. So
Okay, there you go. Not a losing season yet. New England Patriots. Man, this team, I don't know, nor do I care. Mac Jones. I mean, it's clear that the front office has like been a little suspect about Mac Jones because of the way he's acted. But this team, like, it's the Patriots, so they're always gonna be, I guess, not a bad team. But they need some weapons, man. They need to be on the lookout for some weapons, and I, they need to find Mac Jones some weapons, especially on the receiving end. But their defense, of course, it's always gonna be there. They're not. It's not the same Patriots anymore. It's just weird. They have so much stuff to do, and of course, they're very weird with the draft. They have like an acquired taste. But yeah, Jets. Of course, the Jets are here. The sun is hot. They need a quarterback. They have options, I guess, to a certain extent. Derek Carr seems to be their leading candidate. Who knows what Aaron Rodgers is going to do? But they're a quarterback away, I think, from making some decent noise, depending on who their quarterback is. But they're in purgatory at the moment. They are in purgatory. They need. I still think, and Dame, if you want to agree with me here, I still think they need a receiver. I know I love Garrett Wilson. I don't trust Corey Davis. I don't know what's going on with Elijah Moore. I still think you need another wide receiver, in my opinion. You could kind of find a running back in the draft, like you could always find a running back, but like I still think they're in need of a wide receiver that could help out Garrett Wilson, and like you're kind of like Elijah Moore, you're kind of banking on the new quarterback to kind of establish a decent relationship with him, but who knows? And again, Corey Davis, he'll be gone next year, whatever. Rebuild / not good is the next tier. Texans, Colts, Titans. I think those three teams. I think the Colts, are the best team in this tier list, but I think they're kind of tearing it down. I think not to a full extent like the Texans, where they kind of they need help across all the positions. They do still have some decent pieces, but I do think it's kind of a rebuild mode for the Colts. The Texans, I like the D'Amico Ryans hire, but they're just rebuild starts with this draft. They have a decent amount of picks actually. Two top 10s, I believe. Do they?
yeah,
Or something around like two top 12, two in the top 12, something like that, because I believe they have the Browns pick as well. And then the Titans, I think they're waving the white flag. Ryan Tannehill isn't good anymore.
he was never good to begin with.
Yeah, I was being nice. You could kind of develop Malik Willis. They do have some decent. I actually like what's his name? Who's the wide receiver?
Oh,
Burks.
Burks. Yeah,
I,
Traylon Burks.
yeah, I do like Traylon Burks a lot. I do think they have some stuff there to develop, but again, I think the Titans' era is over. Obviously, Derrick Henry is there, so like, I don't know. Mike Vrabel is great, but I just think that they're in the process of like having a down year, and then at that point, if you have a down year, I think this year is going to dictate whether or not they're going to go full rebuild after it, or if they just want to like make moves to a point where they're just like, okay, we don't want to like be bad. Let's go. We were in the AFC Championship game like 3 years ago. I don't know. It feels like they peaked then. In my opinion, they should be rebuilding. But I also have Slash not good, and I don't think the Titans will be good this year, much to the satisfaction of some people in this podcast. So, those are my tiers for the AFC, fellas. Anything that stood out to you? Disagreements? Agreements? I know the question marks in the purgatory tier could be interchangeable, but yeah, if you want me to just, I'll repeat them just so you guys kind of have
Yeah,
like,
please.
yeah, yeah. Stay not paying attention. I know.
No, I am.
Titans,
I started writing them down, but I
nice.
lost track of a couple.
That's nice of you, Dame. I appreciate it. All right, Titans tier: Kansas City Chiefs, Cincinnati Bengals, Buffalo Bills.
I'm good with that.
Secondary tier, which is the tier below the Titans: Los Angeles Chargers, Miami Dolphins, Jacksonville Jaguars. Question marks tier: Baltimore Ravens, Cleveland Browns, Las Vegas Raiders. Purgatory at the moment tier: New York Jets, New England Patriots, Pittsburgh Steelers, Denver Broncos, and then of course the final tier, the rebuild slash not good tier: the Texans, the Colts, the Titans. So, Dame, let me start off with you. What'd you make of my tiers? Agreements, disagreements?
Okay, so your tiers are very similar to mine.
Nice.
Except I would not have the Ravens and the Raiders in the same tier. I think the Ravens are far much ahead of the Raiders, or where the Raiders are at. I think the Raiders are closer to the bottom tier with the Texans and Colts than they are to
Mm.
where you put them. I mean, losing Derek Carr, who's going to be their quarterback? I forgot who their backup even is. I know he had that one like kind of good game, but like
Stidham?
I think he's a free agent though. Even he's not even under contract.
there you go. Like I can't. I don't know who's going to start for them.
I
And
just have respect for their roster. I do think they have some decent
you
weapons.
got to understand that Josh Jacobs is a free agent as well.
Oh God.
So I mean, their wall is on crack, and
All right. Hey, he's doing better now, man. Jeez.
if Devontae Adams doesn't get a quarterback, he's probably going to ask out as well. So I'm taking all these things into account as well as having the awful defense. Like, not I wouldn't say awful anymore, but they're not where they kind of need to be. So I'd say they're more towards the bottom tier than where you put them. Um, unless I mean, I could see them trading up for a quarterback, but like I feel like there's teams ahead of them, like the Colts or something, that might trade that have an easier path to trade up than they do.
I mean, they could scoop up. I mean, I don't even know if they can. Anthony Richardson. That'd be interesting.
They could, but like there's a lot of chatter about him going one. I don't think it's gonna happen, but like
He's not
I mean,
dropping them because like the Panthers and the Falcons.
people, I still think he's gonna go top. What pick do they have? Are they ahead of the Panthers or
No,
behind them?
they're
So
behind.
there you go. So you have the Panthers, the Colts, and the Texans all ahead of them, who I think are all going to draft a quarterback, if not trade up for one. So I think it's going to be tough for the Raiders to get one in the draft. And I don't know what free agent going to go there unless Aaron Rodgers is going there.
I mean, that's a
Um,
thing, isn't it?
I mean, if Aaron Rodgers goes there, then I'll change my opinion. But I'm going off based off what the roster is now and based off that I don't think there's going to be a viable QB option for them to get. I think they're more towards the bottom.
Oh,
Maybe
Dame. I was
yeah.
mistaken. I am very mistaken. The Las Vegas Raiders actually pick before the Atlanta Falcons and the Carolina
Interesting.
Panthers, so they could get an Anthony Richardson. Okay.
Okay, so they can, but still, Anthony Richards is a project. He's not a guy that should be starting day one. Like they shouldn't make the same mistake that teams make, like the Jets, and starting a quarterback that isn't fully developed yet, doesn't have the experience to start from day one in the NFL. So, regardless if they get Anthony Richardson, I just don't think they should start him. But um, and I'm also maybe a little higher on the Raiders. I'd have them not the Raiders, the Ravens, than you are. I'd have them in the same tier as the Chargers, Dolphins, and Jags. That's just based on the fact that I just don't see a way Lamar Jackson's leaving. I don't think they're gonna let him leave. I think one way or another they're gonna figure out a way to keep Lamar Jackson around. And there's a lot of heat on the GM. I don't know if you guys saw Rashad Bateman came at him today.
Yeah.
He said the GM said something about they haven't been able to hit on wide receivers or like an all pro wide receiver. And then Rashad Bateman kind of came at him, saying that he needs to stop putting the blame on players and look at himself or something like that. So I think it's going to put a lot of pressure on the front office to not only get Lamar Jackson done, but kind of get that wide receiver position right, because I personally can't remember last time the Ravens had a great wide receiver. So a lot of pressure on the Ravens front office this season. But other than that, I definitely do agree with your tiers. I think the Jets, Pats, and Steelers and Broncos are all kind of the same. And that last three, Texans, Colts, Titans, are all awful. So yeah, I definitely agree with the rest. But other than those two.
Yeah. Jurg?
So, real quick, just to speak on what Dame mentioned here. So, is a quote from the Ravens GM, Eric DaCosta. on problems drafting wide receivers. Quote, if I had an answer, that would probably mean I would have some better wide receivers. We're going to keep swinging. And Rashad Bateman, he tweeted and then eventually quickly took it down, but people were able to screenshot it. How about you play to your players' strength and stop pointing the finger at us and number 8? Blame the one you let do this. We take heat 24/7 and keep us healthy. Care about us, see what happened. Ain't no promises though. Tired of y'all lying and capping on players for no reason. Um, I I agree with him, and honest to God, I have zero faith in the Ravens' ability to keep Lamar. I don't see any reason why he should want to stay there if it's been clear the last 2 years that he is the reason why that team is any kind of successful at any point over the last few seasons. And if they just don't want to pay him, if I was Lamar, I would go to where the sun is shinier and the grass is greener. And considering you're in Baltimore,
In
Maryland at the
Jersey?
moment, it well, I mean, New Jersey ain't that much sunnier, but it's probably better than Baltimore, Maryland. Like at the end of the day, this organization has lost faith in me. This is like for the last 10, 15, 20 years, the praises of the Baltimore Ravens organization has been sung. This is always known as a top tier first class organization, always hit on their first round picks, was always able to surround with the right players they need, especially on the defensive side of things. And that just has not been the case just over the last couple of seasons. And I think they deserve to lose Lamar Jackson at this point. John Harbaugh has done nothing over the last couple seasons to help diversify the offense, especially with Greg Roman. Their play calling has been stale and staggered the last few years. You clearly saw Tyler Huntley. Like everyone was like, oh, but Tyler Huntley, similar play style. Play style, it might be the same, but goddamn, there's a difference in talent level, man. Like Lamar Jackson has been the reason why that team has had even a modicum, a dollop of success over the last 4 or 5 years. I think they deserve to lose him. I don't think they deserve to keep him. So I'm going to assume that they're going to lose him this offseason because I have zero faith that they should and will keep him. The thing is that they're going to try to not tank. Like the thing with the Baltimore Ravens is that that is not the type of organization. It has been ingrained in them to continue to compete. So consider them more so like Chris. You'll see this. The Miami Heat, right? The Baltimore Ravens are the Miami Heat of the NFL. They don't tank. They willingly do what they can to not tank. At the same time, though, like that doesn't let them get the top tier talent. That doesn't let them, you know, get the guys that they want. So in terms of higher up in the draft, and maybe some higher picks would work, but at the end of the day, man, like this team is flawed. The system is flawed. Assuming, which is for me personally, that they're going to lose Lamar Jackson, I'm throwing them into the purgatory / bad tier if they lose Lamar, because it's been clear that they have built that team around him, and if they lose him, and if they don't get a good enough replacement, I don't know what they're going to do. Uh, Other than that, me personally, I have a massive disagreement. Me personally, I'm with Dame from what he said about the Vegas Raiders as well. But I would like. It's kind of weird. I'm kind of putting them sort of in the same category if I'm bumping the Ravens down. But again, this is me assuming that they're going to lose Lamar for this. But no, yeah, I have both those teams down. My only question mark. I can't believe I'm saying this. My only question mark is really the Cleveland Browns. I'm trying to think if I'm willing. Honestly, I might be willing to put the Jets up into the question mark category because literally all you guys need
Nice.
is a quarterback. Like I don't see any reason in the world why if look, I'm not I've been nice to Derek Carr. I'm not the biggest Derek Carr fan. I mean, I think he's better than Ryan Tannehill, but is that a high standard for me? Yeah. But I think a Derek Carr or an Aaron Rodgers would be an amazing ad. Like a better quarterback last season, y'all would have been in the playoffs. So I think you guys deserve to be in the question mark tier because you got the skill position group and you guys got the defense. I think the Jets could go up to the question mark tier. So I would bump them up. I would bump the Raiders down. I would bump the Ravens down because, again, I'm saying that I think they're going to lose Lamar in part because I think they deserve to. Other than that, I think that's about it. I really don't like Russell Wilson, so I kind of want to bump him down to the bad, but I guess they're technically not bad, and now Sean Payne's there, so it should be better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Outside of that, can I make
Please.
if I can make up a tier of just get off my television screen and I could just put the Tennessee Titans there, I would also do that. And aside from that, I think I'm just about set. So I agree with the top teams that you have outlined, Chris. I agree with your second tier. I have the Browns and the Jets in my question mark tier. I in my purgatory, I got the Pats, the Steelers, and the Broncos and the Ravens. In bad, I have the Raiders, Texans, and Colts. And in the I never want to watch a single game of you ever again tier, I have the Tennessee Titans and Ryan Tannehill. So yeah.
All right. Okay. Let's move on over to the NFC, where I think things are a bit more interesting. I don't know. Titans tier for the NFC. I have only two teams here. I have the Philadelphia Eagles and the San Francisco 49ers, who are just head and shoulders above the rest of the NFC. Eagles just made the Super Bowl. I think they have the best roster in the NFC, top to bottom. Um, 49ers, they're just a quarterback away, but we kind of say that all the time, man. We kind of say that the 49ers always need a quarterback. They're always, when they're healthy, obviously, like, one of the best teams in the NFL just in general, but man, like, their quarterback situation is so weird right now. Jimmy G's, I think, gone. Trey Lance is coming off an injury. Brock Purdy's hurt. I don't know what goes on with them, but of course they're so good that they make it work. They could kind of make anything work, as we just saw with Brock Purdy. So those are the two teams in my Titans tier. Second tier, Dallas Cowboys. It's kind of the same story with them all the time. I don't know. They're a good team, and I think they have a good roster. I think they could make some decent moves this offseason, if they fill in some gaps. But it's the same story all the time, man. Like, we know what they're gonna do come the playoffs. Like, they might make a divisional round, but that's it. I don't know. I'm not huge on Dak Prescott. It's Jerry Jones. Who knows what's gonna happen with Ezekiel Elliott? But again, I think there's just a bit more certainty compared to the other teams below them. So that's why I have them in second tier. They're the only team in that secondary tier. Next tier, the question marks. So I kind of have a similar thing here, where I have the question marks in the purgatory tier. This could all be interchangeable in my opinion. I just think that these so the question marks tier, again, I know that there'll be some disagreements. I have the Tampa Bay Bucks, the Los Angeles Rams, and the Green Bay Packers. I only say that because I feel like they have more win now pieces than the other teams that I'm going to state. I think that they have decent rosters top to bottom. Besides, I think quarterbacks for most of them, and I know that the Rams have a quarterback, but I think Matt Stafford is on the decline. Who knows what's going on with his elbow? They have more issues. I think with the offensive line, I think they need more help on the receiving core. I know it sounds crazy because they have Cooper Kupp, but they're just kind of lacking. But yeah, the Bucks, I do think you have a decent team there, but they need a quarterback now. Packers, who knows what's going to happen with Aaron Rodgers? I think if Aaron Rodgers does return, which would be hilarious, they could make their way to the secondary tier, I feel like, just because of the uncertainty of the other teams. I don't know. Yeah, I just think those teams, I have them as the question marks and not purgatory, because I think they have decent win now rosters if you were to kind of assemble everything together. Who knows? Again, interchangeable with the purgatory tiers list. Purgatory tier at the moment: Minnesota Vikings, New York Giants, Washington Commanders, New Orleans Saints, Atlanta Falcons. Falcons, I think, could have been on like the rebuild / not good team, but I actually do like some of their pieces on the offensive end. Marcus Mariota was released, thank God. But again, I like some of their offensive pieces to a point where I just feel like if they trade for a Lamar Jackson, I kind of like the Atlanta Falcons a lot. I think that offense would be booming. So yeah, I think they're just kind of like a good quarterback away. But you could say that about a lot of teams. But I think there's a lot more holes in their roster to a point where I can't put them in like the first three tiers. So yeah, Saints, again, similar to the Falcons, I think they have some decent pieces. I do think because of their division being ass, that they could be, if they get like a Derek Carr here or a decent quarterback, they can make some noise. And again, if you win that division, that's like a guaranteed, I think, fourth seed at least, right? So boom, right there. Commanders, again, same thing with the Saints and Falcons. Decent pieces, and I also like some of their pieces on defense as well. Some decent offensive pieces. You got Eric Bieniemy recently, but again, quarterback position is in flux. Seems to be a recurring theme. Giants, I think the Giants were too. The Giants had a good season at the worst time possible, because now Daniel Jones wants generational wealth. Saquon Barkley, I don't think they're gonna like see eye to eye in terms of like what the agreement is financially. He might be a free agent. I don't know, man. Like, there's more question marks for the Giants, but like, I mean, if they lose some of these key pieces that brought them to the stage of being a good football team, then what happens after that? It's like, how are you going to replace these like key pieces, right? I don't know. And then Minnesota Vikings, very simple. You have Kirk Cousins there. I mean, what is your ceiling? I mean, Justin Jefferson, God bless him, but they're always going to be in purgatory because of Kirk Cousins. Like, there's a ceiling to that team. Because the thing is with question marks, I think that question mark, like, depending on how you answer it, could move you up or it could move you down. But I think because of the rosters of the question marks being more like win now, more likely that they move up. That's just me. A good piece away from moving up. So that is my purgatory at the moment team. Again, I will repeat these teams at the end. Extra tier for this one, just because I like these teams a decent amount compared to the other teams. The Detroit Lions and the Seattle Seahawks. They are in the come up tier, in which I think really fun teams, surprise a lot of us, and I think they're a few pieces away from actually making some noise in their conference. So the Lions, I've been bullish on the Lions for a bit now. I think they start off the season a bit slow. I think they can make some key additions on the defensive end. I think they have weapons on offense. Jared Goff, I think, why move on from him? I think he's fine for them right now. Just because, like, they're not bad enough to be replacing him with like a CJ Stroud or like a Bryce Young. Like, they can't really pick that high. So why not pick Jared Goff? Like, there's no other better options on the market unless like wait a few years until like you're fully ready to win now, and then you make that move for that quarterback that could be available. So I think they're on the come up. They're very fun to watch, very easy to root for. Shout out to them, Seahawks. Geno Smith, great story. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. They had a great draft last season. They'll build upon that this season. I think they're both on the come up, and the Seahawks made the playoffs. So boom, right there. Who knows what's gonna happen with Geno Smith? But props to them. Rebuild / not good tier. Cardinals, Chicago Bears, Carolina Panthers. Carolina Panthers, I could have moved up, but I don't know. There's something about them. I think you could move the Panthers to the purgatory at the moment team, because I think you can kind of put that for every NFC South team, I believe. That's the NFC South. It's their quarterback that's in flux. I like DJ Moore a lot. I like some of their pieces on the defensive end as well. Maybe they'll get JC Horn back, like fully healthy. But who knows what they're going to do with the draft this year? I mean, they hired Frank Reich, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the thing. Like, I don't know. Like, they should be a rebuilding team, but I just don't think they're going to. They're going to be I think they're going to try and actually win that division, which is fair because the division's kind of wide open now that Brady's gone. So I don't know. Maybe I'm a little bearish on them compared to like other people, but I don't know. I really don't. I can't give you a concrete answer as to why I'm not as high on them as like another team. But they could easily be They could easily be on the purgatory at the moment here. Chicago Bears just need help. Besides the most important position in football, which is the quarterback position, which Justin Fields is.
They need help there.
I knew you were going to say that, but I don't. They just. I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory. They're probably going to trade out of the number one pick, maybe multiple times actually. Could trade the number one pick to get to number 4. They could trade the number 4 pick and just get more draft capital. They need weapons on offense. They need more help on defense. They need help on the offensive line. They need so much. So the Bears, they're going to be in rebuild mode. They'll be fun to watch maybe sometimes because you have Justin Fields, but other than that, looking bleak. Cardinals are an absolute mess. I have no idea what's going on. Murray's going to be out for at least half the season. I think you should keep him out for the entire season. Hopkins is gone, clearly. Zach Ertz, I don't know what's going to be happening with him. I don't know how they're going to vibe with that new coach, man. That was such an awkward press conference, bro. I just feel like no one wanted the job and they just hired him. And why? Well, he's not going to say no. But Cardinals are in shambles right now. The vibes are off. Their key players are hurt. And one of them is going to be traded probably. So, rebuild / not good. Okay, let me just repeat that. Titans of the NFC. Eagles and 49ers. Secondary tier, I have the Dallas Cowboys. Question marks tier. Tampa Bay Bucks. Los Angeles Rams, Green Bay Packers. Purgatory at the moment tier. Vikings, Giants, Commanders, Saints, Falcons. The come-up tier. Detroit Lions and the Seattle Seahawks. And then, of course, the rebuilding / not good tier. Cardinals, Bears, and Panthers. So, Jurg, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Is
What'd
there?
you make of my tiers here? I know my question marks / purgatory at the moment. Differences could be a little bit meh. Like I didn't explain that pretty well, but
Right, right, right.
what'd you make of my tier list here?
So yeah, I think because I think the Lions and the Seahawks deserve to be in their own tier in terms of the come up. It all depends on the offseason both those teams have, especially at the quarterback position for both sides. I think the bad teams, like you said, you have the Cardinals, Bears, and Panthers. The Cardinals are not going to have Kyler for the year. The Bears, Dame thinks they should move on from Justin Fields. I think you can work with him. You just need to really vastly improve the rest of the roster. And I like I would kind of move up the Panthers to purgatory because I think the entirety of the NFC South belongs in purgatory. Like I would even put the
Yeah.
like it all depends on who Tampa gets, but like Tampa is in such a bad cap situation where even when if they get a better quarterback, like there's rumors of who they have to cut. Like they might have to cut Shaq Barrett, they might have to cut Donovan Smith. Like they need to clear out a lot of cap space. A lot of teams do here, but like I think the entirety of the NFC South belongs there. So I would technically move up Carolina and move down Tampa because literally anyone can win that division. Like, and I know we're all kind of basing it off of right now, but right now that is literally the only division that I think like I think for all three of us, I think all three of us would assume a division winner in 7 of the 8 divisions. The only one we have no idea about definitively. Like we're just we have as equal of a chance as just throwing darts on a board with these teams' pictures on them compared to like actually trying to break down what the hell could happen. And I know we haven't gone through the offseason yet, but I still think even come past the offseason, we may have no idea who the hell to pick. Like that's how close it is. Where the Saints are a tricky situation. Like, yeah, they have some pieces, but like they've had to recover from cap situation for years now. The Carolina Panthers have a couple young pieces on that defense. They got a DJ Moore. Who the hell is going to play quarterback for them? And an offensive line that still needs to get better, but is improving, has some pieces. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have been a veteran roster the last couple of years that they've been letting, like they just let Leonard Fournette go, I think yesterday. Brady's not going to be there. What the hell is Todd Bowles going to do? And the last team, the Atlanta Falcons, no idea. Like just no idea. Like there's a piece here and there, but like I think that whole division deserves to be in purgatory. So that's what I would personally do. I would even make an own division, an own tier, just called the NFC South, because any of those teams could go like anywhere. So I might make my own division there. In regards to your top three, I agree. I think the Cowboys are definitively like the third best team behind the Eagles and the 49ers. I like the fact that you put the Vikings in purgatory. I would maybe argue you could push them to question mark because there is talent there, but as we clearly saw, they were upset in the playoffs. Literally, this whole podcast picked them to get upset. I think all of America picked them to get upset, and they did not prove any of us wrong, to say the very least. Because as I've said, what have I said before, boys? The death taxes and Kirk Cousins not winning a playoff game or a big time game when it matters the most. Oh dear, it happened again. But this Minnesota Vikings team, it the offense is fine, but there could be a little bit of change with it. I think Adam Thielen is someone that a lot of people are projecting he might get cut. Um, what is the offense going to look like in year two with Kevin O'Connell? Because think about it, like you got off to such a hot start, but teams will figure it out eventually. So what are they going to do to counteract that, to have more scheming, to even be more creative? That defense needs to be heavily worked on in the offseason. So that's why I would maybe put the Vikings up in question mark, because in theory, they should be the fourth best team here, because you have the Eagles, the 49ers, and the Cowboys. The NFC South winner, no matter who it is, will not be the fourth best team in the NFC. So the Vikings, I would give fourth best team on paper, but at the same time, like it's very pushy. But I would bump them up to question mark, as much as I've criticized that team this entire season. I would put them up to question mark because I think they're just still a step above of Green Bay and LA. I'm putting Green Bay. I'm assuming they're losing Aaron Rodgers. I'm putting them all the way down bad, because I think that roster is going to get changed once Aaron Rodgers isn't there anymore. I think, like I have said this before, and look, I'm sorry, Jordan Love. This is nothing personal, but that's going to become like a 4-win team if you have quarterback, maybe 5. Like it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be good. So again, we can only base this off assumptions. I'm assuming they're losing Aaron Rodgers, so I'm going to bump the Packers down to bad. The LA Rams I'm putting in purgatory because they just cut Bobby Wagner. There's rumors of Jalen Ramsey. Matthew Stafford got injured to the end of last year, and there was a rumor of what was going to happen with Stafford. Like, it's not a guarantee, I think, what the rest of his career is going to look like. So I think the Rams in purgatory right now, because like you said, there's a lot that has to happen. And again, Sean McVay, these last couple seasons, it's been rumored that he could go away. I think when you have that, it could affect them. Those rumors are probably going to come back up again this offseason for all we know. The Giants, I agree with you, because Like I made this comparison on the show, I think only once, but this is very similar to me to the season where the Jaguars made it to the AFC title game and they paid Blake Bortles after that, and man, did they regret it. And I think they're going to regret if they pay Daniel Jones too much. If they get him on a decent deal, I'm cool with it. But this is the Jaguars with Blake Bortles. This is the Tennessee Titans with Ryan Tannehill after they randomly made the AFC title game with him. You pay franchise quarterback type money to a guy who clearly will never be a franchise quarterback. What are you doing? So I think the Giants are fair there because we said it all last season. It was an unsustainable way for them to win, and they finally got beat by a real team, and they're just below the other teams in the tiers above them. I know technically I'm putting the Vikings above them, but talent wise, Minnesota should be better. Talent wise, they should have beaten them last year. They just didn't. But we have to base this off talent right now. So my big changes would be I'm moving Green Bay down to bad. I am pushing the Minnesota Vikings up to question mark. I'm keeping the Giants in purgatory, but they're probably my number one team in the purgatory category. I'm putting the Rams down to purgatory, and I'm making the NFC South its own thing. Like the NFC is just the AFC is where the like it's kind of funny because they didn't mention this in the NHL, so I'd have to double check if this is still the case. But the top 6 teams in the NHL this season right now, points wise, all in the Eastern Conference, right? In the NFL, if we were to make that comparison, how many teams in the AFC, like if we had to pick our top 7 to 8 teams in the NFL, how many of them are AFC teams? Like, I think it's like, I think if we have to try to pick our top 8 teams in the NFL, I think 6 of the 8 are going to be AFC teams. So, by that logic, the NFC is way more wide open. It's just the 2 teams at the top are so overwhelming. I think the Eagles are great, but they still have some questions to prove in the offseason because they got a lot of guys that they have to figure out contract wise. I think the 49ers, like you said it best, they're a quarterback away, but we've been saying that for so long. When are they finally going to get that quarterback? So the NFC is wide open. Like this could very much change, weeks, months down the line. Of course, we're probably going to revisit something close to this after free agency and the draft, which I cannot wait for us personally. Our third ever NFL mock draft is going to be absolute bangers here on the Somewhat Sports Podcast. But I think that's what I have it right now. The AFC, I think, is more cut and dry of who the top of the top is. I think the NFC is so wide open. Any of these teams that we are moving around could move up, but those are my tiers personally.
Jurg, if Aaron Rodgers stays with the Packers, where would you move them? Where would you put them, rather?
See, but because here's the thing. Will Aaron Rodgers probably play better next season? Because I think the thumb will be better and his foot, etc. Yes. But that defense, I think a lot of people are forgetting the defense played fine last year, but they produced 0 pass rush. Like they did nothing. So they need to make a lot of roster improvements. And I know Rodgers has said he's willing to take a pay cut, but even with him fixing his cap situation again and giving them more space, I don't know, man. I just don't have faith in this team. I think that they need to make a move. It was clear they needed a better wide receiver last year. And this front office has proven that they are not aggressive enough to do it. I think even if Rodgers comes back, I think question mark at best right now. And it's because I have 0 faith in the rest of this team. There's a reason why Aaron Rodgers, to me, keeps them in question mark. But if they lose him, they go all the way down to bad. There's a reason for that. Like, he's carried that team for so long.
So I agree with the Eagles and the Niners. With the Cowboys, I know you put them by yourself, but I think I would put the Vikings there. I think actually the Vikings might be a better team than the Cowboys, and both these teams are just notorious for kind of being really good in the regular season. Then once it comes to playoffs, they kind of blow it, and they just can't play in the big games. Same story with Dak and Kirk Cousins. It just seems like that every single year. Regular season, great teams. You think this is the year they're going to turn around, and then comes the postseason, they kind of screw it up. In the following tier, where you had the Packers, Rams, and Bucks, I'd have the Rams and Bucks in there, but then I wouldn't have the Lions and Seattle in their own come up tier. I think they're just as good as the Rams and Bucks, and I'd add the Giants in there too. I think the Giants, just from their their defense and Brian Daboll's coaching, I think they deserve to. They're just as good as the Rams and Bucks. Um, in the Lions and Seattle, same thing. I think Seattle might be the best out of those 5 teams, and the Lions are right there. And I think they'll improve this season, this off season, even more with the cap space they have and the 2 top 10 or top 12 picks or whatever the case may be. As for the Bucks, I mean, their roster is great, and I know they lost Tom Brady, but you really can't get worse at quarterback than they had last season. So I'm not too big on their downfall going into the season. I think they might be even better because honestly, you could put one of us 3 at QB and you might be improved. on the offensive side of the ball.
I don't know
So
about that. I know Brady didn't play good, but like if they put an average quarterback there last season, they're not. I don't think they would have. Maybe the
I
division.
mean,
But I don't think
Brady was below average. So
he threw
if
for
you put
over.
average, if you by simple math, if you put
He
average in
sucks,
there, then
Jurg.
you
It's
gotta
over.
yeah.
All right.
So so and then
I mean,
after that, the
ignore the
Rams.
fact that they have to cut like 5 players that I said, but all right.
But then with the Rams, I just think comes down to Matthew Stafford's availability, because I think they could be in that Cowboys Vikings tier or tier ahead, or even play their way into the Niners and Eagles tier. But I'm just not too sure. Matthew Stafford's health. I mean, it's a back and an elbow. I'm pretty sure. Like, those are really hard things to kind of play through, especially when you're older and especially as a quarterback. So it's really hard for me to see him being 100% healthy, playing all 16 games, and none of those 2 injuries being a factor in his performance or him missing games. And obviously they have an awful cap situation, awful draft. They have like no draft picks either. So it's going to be really hard for this team to improve unless they kind of improve within, and they're all kind of old and wearing down and stuff. I'd have the Packers only at the bottom tier as well. Just like Jurg said. I think they're awful, and I think Aaron Rodgers is leaving. I don't know where he's going, but I just see no way in which he comes back to the Packers. I think he's either retires or goes to another team. And Jordan Love, I mean, if they really had faith in Jordan Love, they would have moved on for Aaron Rodgers a year or two ago, because they see this guy in practice each and every single day. They see the way he throws, they see the way he commands the offense. They see him every single preseason, and yet they gave Aaron Rodgers like $60 million guaranteed or whatever it was, like the highest paid QB ever. So clearly they don't have that much faith in Jordan Love, because it would have been much smarter to move on for Aaron Rodgers, go with Jordan Love if you really had confidence in him and saw what you liked in him, and use that cap space to improve your team around. That's literally the key to kind of a rebuild and starting your franchise moving forward and becoming a contender. You have a QB on a rookie deal, and then you just use that money to get playmakers everywhere else outside of QB position. Because once you pay the quarterback position, you kind of got to save money elsewhere. So I think the Packers really don't have too much faith in Jordan Love. So I don't have faith in Jordan Love.
Not a lot of
Other
love
than,
for Jordan.
yeah,
Yeah.
I kind of went through my head, but I didn't want to be that guy. But obviously,
Alright.
you're that guy.
Yeah.
Other than that, I agree with everything else. I think the Saints, Falcons, Commanders are kind of in that middle. They're like a 7-9, 8-8, stuff like that. Obviously, I got the records wrong because it's 17 games now, but they're kind of in the middle of the pack. They could be good or bad. Bears, obviously, where we don't see eye to eye with the Justin Fields thing, but I do believe they should give him another year. I don't think they should draft a quarterback this year. I think they should trade down, get as many draft picks as possible, and then draft a defensive player or kind of maybe a weapon or offensive lineman to help Justin Fields out. Because, I mean, it's still too early to give up on him. And I'm not saying he's always going to be bad. I'm just saying he's bad right now. So the Bears are very interesting because they do have a lot of cap space. And obviously, after they move down, which it looks like that's what they're going to do, they're going to have a lot of draft picks to improve this team. So they're going to be interesting to watch next season. The Cards are also interesting because they do have a top 5 pick, and they obviously aren't drafting a quarterback because of Kyle Murray. So it's very similar to the Bengals. I wouldn't say they're as good as the Bengals, but it's kind of similar situation where you have your franchise quarterback that is out for the year, and you have a top 5 pick. The Bengals are on with Jamar Chase. I don't think this is Jamar Chase in this draft, but I think a team like the Cardinals, whose defense is pretty bad, I think they kind of lean in that direction. Maybe Will Anderson, and I think that will really help this team moving forward. But I mean, did you guys see? By the way, did you guys see the whole reports about the Cardinals like facility and
Yes,
stuff?
yes. Yo, I can't
I mean,
believe that shit. That that's
I mean,
charging, bro.
what like 2 months ago when I went to Arizona, we went to a
Uh-huh.
stadium tour, and like the tour lady was making it seem like there was a generational stadium, generational facility, like
I mean, that's
amazing
their
locker
job.
rooms and staff. I'm like, wow, this is great. And then this shit comes out. I'm like, wow, I really went on a tour to like the most garbage stadium ever.
This
D
man
minus
went on a
for
tour to lies, bro. Just straight lies.
Yeah,
Wow.
literally. Like I went into locker room too, and they were rated like the worst locker room ever. I'm like, damn. Like I wonder what all these other locker rooms in the NFL are.
Did
But
they look nice at least?
I mean, we didn't see the home locker room. We only saw a visiting locker room, and like the visiting locker room was like something I seen in like high school,
Oh my god.
and like it wasn't great. Like it was a regular locker room, so that's why I was shocked. Unless I don't know, whatever. But all the other tiers and teams that are in these tiers, I agree with. But yeah,
Okay, that was our tier list. Now, before we cap it off completely, Bobby Wagner released Jalen Ramsey and trade rumors. Fellas, quick. We don't have to elaborate. Predictions on both those players. Do y'all see them going? Which teams do y'all see those two going to? If Ramsey gets moved. See, he does get moved. Yeah, Bobby Wagner, Jalen Ramsey. Jurg, first.
I have Jalen Ramsey to the Cincinnati Bengals. I think they need a number one cornerback,
Ooh.
and I think his kind of swagger would really fit well with that team. Um, I just think it makes sense. They need a corner. Like they need to help the defense. They need a number one. Look, I know he wasn't the same last season, but Jalen Ramsey is still a top tier athlete. He's still a great player, and I think him in Cincinnati would be really great because I think that defense has been extremely well coached. There's a reason why both the Bengals coordinators were interviewed a lot this offseason.
Yeah.
And I think the fact they were able to keep both of them was massive because I think that just helps make the team better. So that's it with Jalen Ramsey for me. For Bobby Wagner now, see, I think it's good. Like he's just stayed in the NFC his whole career, so I think it would still be the NFC. I think he would sign with I can't think of another team, but like shout out to my boy Bars, who's been on the show a few times. But I think Bobby Wagner to the Giants would make a lot of sense for the team. I think linebacker was probably the weakest portion of their defensive unit last year.
Didn't he say he wants to win though?
I mean, they made the playoffs. I don't know. You
What
gotta
a
ask him
shot.
that, Chief.
I mean, come on now, pal. I mean,
Damn. You better hope I don't show Bars this clip, Chris, because
what's he gonna do? Get back on the show, Bars. Let me see.
But yeah, I think Bobby Wagner there, or even like just because it makes sense because he feels like the type. Bobby Wagner on the Jaguars or the Steelers would be pretty cool. I think on one of those two teams, the Jaguars. I think the AFC South is theirs. We've clearly made it clear on the show that we think it's a one-team division. Why not Bobby Wagner to the Jaguars to have a little bit of fun? Let's make it interesting. Let's make the NFL interesting. I started off talking about how the NHL was amazing the last week and a half, 2 weeks. Let's make the NFL interesting. Let's get Bobby Wagner and the Jacksonville Jaguars, UNA.
Thought you were gonna say let's get Bobby Wagner on the podcast, which would be great.
I mean, hey, does someone want to hit him up?
I mean, I'm down. Dame.
so Bobby Wagner, I'm stuck on two teams, but I'm gonna lean with the Cowboys. I think they have the defense is obviously one of the best, but I think they have a missing piece in the middle of that defense. And I think putting Bobby Wagner there, a guy who's obviously won a Super Bowl and at one time was the best linebacker in the league, I think would be a great addition there. I'm pretty sure he's talked about how he was a Cowboys fan or he likes the Cowboys or something like that before. But I would not be surprised if he goes back to Seattle. I think that would be a very interesting reunion. Obviously, the Seahawks aren't rebuilding anymore, and they're a team that made the playoffs last year. I think putting him right back on that defense and obviously something both sides are familiar with, I think it'd be an interesting reunion. Jalen Ramsey, I'm going to go with another reunion. I think him going to the Jaguars would be great. Obviously, they have everything going on the offensive side. They have the weapons with Calvin Ridley hopefully coming back. He hasn't been reinstated yet. I'm pretty sure they just tagged Evan Ingram today. So he's coming back.
They
Obviously,
did.
Travis Etienne, Trevor Lawrence, like their defense is what needs to be improved now. I think Jalen Ramsey going right back there, being that veteran piece. Obviously, won a Super Bowl, I think would be great. Also, look out for the Lions, I think is another great landing spot for Jalen Ramsey. Same thing, kind of like that offense is young and upcoming, and that defense, you put him on the other side of Jeff Okudah, who kind of has been disappointing, but I think had a little bit of a comeback year last year. I think putting him alongside Jalen Ramsey would be great for both of them and for that team in general, because I think their biggest weakness overall on that team is their secondary. So, I mean, adding a guy who's arguably for the past few years was the best cornerback in the league, I think would be a big get.
To the defense of Jeff Okudah, he has been hurt. He's kind of recovering from that injury, but I hear you. I hear you. I think there has been
fine last season.
There has been some flirtation, I think, with some of the Lions players with Ramsey, and he has been teammates with Jared Goff before, so who knows? But yeah, should be a lot of movement in the NFL these next coming weeks. All right. That'll do it for this week. Fellas, what an episode. A jam-packed week. Just juice across the NHL and the NFL. I love it. Bunch of shit to talk about, and I'm pretty sure there's going to be a bunch of shit to talk about going forward. Jurg, where can they find us on the socials?
Guys, for a very exciting time coming up for us. It's a long ways away, but the NFL draft is slowly but surely approaching. So if you want to get all the updates on that and the fun we're going to have with the mock, plus the guests that we're going to have on for the mock draft as we have in both the first two, you got to make sure you follow the somewhat.sports page on Instagram. We've gotten over 100 a while back. We're still adding people. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share this to everyone you know from YouTube and Spotify. Like, comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please follow us on Spotify. Give us 5 stars. Let us know what you love about the program. Look, we have a lot of fun. We just had a week off, so sometimes boys say we got to recharge. Super Bowl is a little bit of a recharge period for us, and we're back. We're ready to go. We got the NFL offseason here that's going to be in full swing in just a couple weeks, like Chris has mentioned. We got the NBA is slowly approaching the playoffs. We got MLB season is going to start up soon. I'm sure we're going to do a preview with that, and of course the Stanley Cup playoffs coming soon with the NBA playoffs. That's the real best playoff in sport. And if you want updates on all that, we're going to talk about all that kind of stuff over the next weeks, months, and all that, maybe even years. And if you want to be along for the ride, follow us at somewhat.sports on Instagram and listen to the show on a weekly basis. Best sports podcast out there. Said it before, say it again. This is the place to be for the top content related to sports on the interwebs.
Beautifully put as always, Jurg. Beautifully put as always. Okay, yeah. Great episode this week. Fellas, you guys did an amazing job. Thanks for steering the ship with me. To all the listeners listening, if you made it this far, we appreciate you greatly. And until next time, peace.